Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Jim Bruton, and he's here today to share with us his new book, The In-Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. Now, Jim has led an extraordinary life. As a little boy, he lived with an active imagination, including a love for wildlife filming, international travel, science fiction, and vintage aviation. In adulthood, he checked every one of those off the list with internationally recognized achievements, including an Emmy for a National Geographic wildlife film, traveling to all 7 continents, the Titanic, the North Pole, and Mount Everest, including also shrinking a satellite truck into his backpack and transmitting live video from places before thought impossible. He also built and flew historical reproduction aircraft for World War I and the early 1930s. But for Jim, this was just the beginning. So let's welcome to the show, Jim Bruton.
Hi, Marianne. How are you today?
I am just excited to have you here to talk about this book. I mean, you have had quite a journey.
I definitely have. It was, I call it the trip of a lifetime. It really was. And it was quite an unexpected flight I had in my airplane a few years ago. And it certainly wasn't the flight I planned on having, but it must have been the one I needed.
So why don't you take us back to that day, the day that you took off in one of your historical planes?
Sure. I used to travel a lot. And then when I settled down, my new wife said, well, so that you don't get restless, why don't you build, some of those old airplanes you're always talking about? And I said, I can do that. So the first plane I built was a World War I fighter, and I flew it, and then I sold it. And I said, okay, I need to build another airplane. So I built this tiny little whimsical looking plane, like something out of a Disney cartoon, called a flying Flea. Imagine a soapbox derby car with wings and an engine, and you pretty much got the idea. You have the idea. I took it up for its first flight in early October of 2016. So just, guess around 3.5 years ago or so. And I didn't really like the way it handled, but it more or less went in the direction I wanted it to go and got me back in one piece, and both the aircraft and the pilot were in reusable condition. So it was a good flight. So I thought, okay, October 6th came around and I said, it's a nice day. I'm going to go out and try to master its quirks. Well, I took off. Everything was fine. I circled the airfield once. And then on my way back around, I lost my engine. It just quit. And I didn't panic, but I did get my propeller restarted, but it stopped again. But because it was a vintage airplane design, it wasn't as clean aerodynamically as aircraft in later days are, So the sink rate was pretty steep. It came down pretty quickly once it didn't have an engine. So I because it was very hilly and very forested near my grass strip, I couldn't make it back to this grass strip. So I said, where else can I go? And there was a very small lake at a Boy Scout camp next to the airstrip. So I aimed for that. And I came down. And because, again, this was only my second time flying this plane, I overshot the bank by about 10 feet. And crashed into these tree trunks at 70 miles an hour, again, in the equivalent of a soapbox derby car. And when the plane stopped crashing, there was no plane left around me. It was just turned into matchsticks. And I broke all my ribs. I ruptured both lungs. My right leg had multiple fractures, and my chin was cut up. I had a hole in my lower back from the engine battery breaking loose and hitting me at 70 miles an hour. Other than that, I was fine. But it was it was definitely a tough spot. Luckily, there was a man fishing. He liked to go and fish during the closed season at the camp because it was quiet. And he luckily he had his phone on him as well. So he was able to call 911 and keep me kind of propped up so I could gasp for air. I couldn't breathe because my lungs were ruptured, but I was able to gasp just enough to stay alive. And Lifestar flew in, the medical evacuation helicopter flew in. They were able to pull me out of the wreckage and fly me up to Hartford Connecticut's trauma center, where an outstanding team was waiting to receive me. And that's the crash itself.
Oh my goodness. That is, I mean, that gentleman was just at the right place at the right time to be there to help you, because otherwise, it might have been a very different story.
Well, not only that, it's interesting because in the newspaper and in the evening news, he was he was described as a retired teacher. What a lot of people didn't know, and he told me later, because he came to visit me in the hospital. He's been to my home and visited me. Greg Gubitosi, great guy. He was also a retired police officer. So if you think about it, he was used to seeing trauma. I'm sure he had to deal with car accidents or, violence or abuse or something like that. So luckily I had someone who could help me who wasn't freaking out, all the blood and the wreckage and all that. He was able to keep us cool and make the right calls and do all the right things to keep me alive. So I probably couldn't have had a much better choice of a person that day to stand by me.
Yeah, definitely one of your angels. Well, and so you get to the hospital, and of course they put you in an induced coma, right?
Yeah, what happened was, obviously people didn't know, but it's funny. My friend picked up my phone at the hangar to bring it to the hospital because he was going to come, and he came with my wife. And it was just a few hours after the crash. But when you lift your phone up and you pick it up, it lights up saying, "Here are all your latest messages." And mine had 3. 1, your evening news has arrived. 2, there's been a plane crash just north of Waterbury, Connecticut. And 3, missed call from your wife. So
Oh boy.
you can sort of put my entire afternoon together right there in those 3 alerts. So they all got up there, and they found me in a breathing machine I was intubated, with tubes going down my throat. I had all kinds of tubes coming in and going out of me. And I was, of course, delirious from physical shock and painkillers and heaven knows what else. And I have really no memory of any of this. But I was able to escape the restraints. Obviously, they wanted to restrain me so that in my delirium, I didn't reach around and grab some important tubing and make life difficult for everyone, especially myself. So they had me restrained, and I kept escaping the restraints, and they were getting upset. And they told my wife, we have multiple day-long operations coming up, and we could lose him at any time. And some of these operations only have a 2% chance of success. So we recommend, inducing a coma. She agreed. And basically, if I'm just in general terms trying to put it together, I would say that when they put me into a coma here, that's when my near-death experience started.
So, my goodness, you're Houdini. So, of course, they put you in the coma because they're trying to make sure that you're doing as well as you can. And then you have your near-death experience. What was that like?
It's interesting. I can describe it, and then afterwards, I could certainly, talk about how it's so different from most other near-death experiences. And I think that difference kind of compounded the task afterwards of me researching to figure out what it is that happened to me, because it was missing some of the common milestones. And yet in a couple that were there, I would say they were deeper and profounder than you usually hear about. So there was no going through a tunnel or seeing deceased loved ones, for example. It was as if I were teleported, like I just simply appeared somewhere. And it was as if it were up on the top of a tall building, like a skyscraper, but on a terrace. And I was looking out over a gray and very dead city. As I characterize it, imagine New York City or some very large city 1,000 years after a nuclear blast or a meteor strike or something like that. Totally dead and abandoned, quiet. And everything was gray. And over me were these deep, dark storm clouds, like it was just getting ready to cut loose with the mother of all storms. And I was just accepting of everything I saw. And as I looked around, I got hit by this wave of nausea deep in my stomach. And I just remember sort of bending over with pain, thinking, I don't think I can stand this. And I would say I said that out loud, whatever that means when you don't have a body. And when I said that, I heard this light clacking sound, like clacking of gears sound off to my left. And I looked over and there was a large, like a 4-story high structure or a sculpture, if you will. And it was shaped like an egg, but it was made out of lattice work. Imagine taking thin, say, metal bands and bending them in a kind of chaotic fashion, but the overall shape that you wind up with is shaped like an egg, standing on its end. And it was within this egg that these little tiny gears were sort of freely suspended in space and moving around, and that's what I heard. So I made my way over there and I looked through the lattice work of this egg at these gears. And it's interesting. They were a special kind of gear that I really knew nothing about, called a sector gear. When we think of a gear, we normally think of a little circle or a wheel with teeth all the way around it. A sector gear is a section of that gear, like a 90-degree section. And the idea is it sweeps back and forth, so you tend to find them in clocks, things that move back and forth. But by definition, it also means it has a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. And as I looked at these gears, some were very clear and definite, and some were not. Some were almost transparent, but they were generally just sort of softly moving around as if they were in idle mode, and they could pass through each other, something obviously that would be physically impossible. And as I looked at them, they were also in varying degrees of focus, so to speak. Like I could see some more clearly than others, but each, no matter whether they appeared in focus to me or not, I could see what they represented. As I looked at each one of these gears, it's as if a video feed would play inside my head of what they represented, and I recognized these to be events from my future, not my present and not my past, but my future. And I remember saying, what is this thing? And a disembodied voice said, this is the future birthing into the now. And it said, this is the process of becoming. And I put my hand through the lattice work to see if I could touch any of these gears. And when I did, one of the gears touched me, and I immediately was hit with another wave of pain. And I just sort of reflexively grabbed this gear and pulled it out through the lattice and threw it. Oh, and I said, what's happening now? Because all the gears started moving around really fast. And it said, each gear is the probability of a thought, word, or action in your future. Your destiny is resetting itself around what you've removed. And then I said, how did I know I could do that? Pull that gear out, remove that future moment. And the disembodied voice said, why else are you here? And I said, I have no idea. I don't even know what this place is. They said, you're in the in-between. I said, in between what? They said, everything. The impossible now between the past and the future. And I said, I don't understand that at all. And it said, it's impossible in its short duration, yet here you are standing inside the eternity of a single moment. And said, do you remember who you are in the world to which your body belongs? And I'll tell you right then and there, I realized I had no idea. If someone had come up to me and said, if you stay any longer, you can't go back, I'd say, go back where? Back to your family. What family? What's that? I had no idea. I was absolutely depersonalized down to zero. Everything that makes me me was gone. And I said, I have no idea. And then I was told, then you see the truth and how the past is dust. And then I said, why do some of these gears cause me pain and some don't? I said, all choices have unintended consequences, some unfortunate and some not. The pain each brings is your guide. And I said, well, where are the gears that feel good? I said, you're not here to feel good. But right at that moment, a new gear swung into view, one in which I saw grandchildren I do not yet have at a amusement park with their mom, one of my daughters, and she was putting them on an amusement ride, and they were excited and happy and laughing. I could see their little fingers hanging onto the car edge, and they just kind of looked like at me, but threw me into their own world. And obviously I let that gear pass by. But again, more gears emerged within view. Like I said, they were sort of passing through each other and in different degrees of focus. But each time they came to rest, I'd pull one out that by definition, I could feel this is to my future detriment. The ones that hurt me because that was a measure of the pain of making that choice in the future. So, like, if one of those gears had been on this day, you'll buy a Powerball ticket and you'll win Powerball. If I touched that gear and it caused me pain, that might mean, yeah, but I became a very terrible person as a result of making that choice. And interestingly, most of these events I did not see, because in reaching through the egg, I had to reach kind of as high up as I could, higher than I could like clearly see. And I really feel that was by design, because again, you can imagine that most of us, if we knew, gosh, there is a chance we could actually win the lottery and be wealthy for the rest of our lives, but we might become the biggest jerks in the world for doing it. Oh, we could be arguing with God all day about that. No, we promise to be good. We won't be a jerk. We've been warned. No, how about we just use the pain as a measure? Because it's very clear. There doesn't have to be a big discussion about it. It's like, okay, because I only have a certain amount of time available to me, at least Earth time, to get this done. So it became apparent that my mission there was to basically clean up my future, to remove as many bad choices as I could in order to basically remove stones from my path in the future so that I have a better chance of becoming the good person I'm meant to be. Well, after doing this over and over and over and watching this thing spin around and around and around with the removal of each big gear that was bad, I turned around and saw this huge pile of gears building up behind me. And I said, it's starting to look like if I don't have a bad future, I have no future at all. Even though now I feel less pain because I am purging the totality of my existence of these bad decisions. I said, am I going to die sooner from all this? And then it really started to say some deep things to me, this voice. It said, your destiny has to fit itself around futures that aren't meant to be. Your number of breaths are already counted. I will worry about your last one. And I said, I don't know how comforting that is. It said, eliminating bad choices doesn't mean you won't make wrong ones. You won't know they're wrong until after they pass. Since right and wrong are variables over which you have no control, the answers to what comes tomorrow are a waste. Better is understanding the beauty of how everything fits and refits together. And I said, so what am I missing here, in my clear lack of understanding? It said, what is before you? Grace. No one deserves salvation. It can only be given by grace. It is your birthright, but it must be chosen at the expense of the world that separates us. And then I said, this fixing my future has been painful, and I feel ashamed I'm not doing it with some moral compass. There's no mantra, there's no scripture, there's no model of, virtue that I can focus on for strength. I said, I'm only guided by pain, and I don't even know when these futures happen. And I said, where is no more important than what or when? Removing your enthusiasm to further chain yourself to the world isn't as painful as carrying the crushing weight of those chains once forged around you. I said, it's as if this place was made so I can do one thing and one thing only with no chance to screw it up. And then I think the in-between said perhaps the most profound thing that anyone's ever said to me. It said, if those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy. And with that, I watched this one gear disintegrate into dust as it passed out of view from the present to the past. And with that, some final words from the in-between. It said, you can't change the past, but you can make better choices in the future. Everything is interconnected, and pay more attention to your relationships. Be gentle with everyone as I am gentle with you. And I said, what's gentle about all this? And it said, you prayed for something for which being here is the answer. And now the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it. And with that, I turned and took one last look at the dead and abandoned city. And then I turned back to the egg and reaching up, put my hand upon it and said, I think I can live with this now. And with that, I was sent back.
Oh my goodness, what a profound story. And to have lived that where you're going through and having this direct communication with, I mean, it sounds like with all that is, you're restructuring how your life is going to be moving forward.
Absolutely. That's so true. And, one of the earliest instances of that I wasn't the same as the in-between said was shortly after that, a friend asked me, it was a great question. She said, on the day you flew, did you have a bad premonition? Like, maybe I shouldn't go flying today. And I said, that is a good question. I said, it's funny, as you ask that question, I feel this urge from the beyond to answer it in a different way than I normally might. And let's forget premonition for a moment. Imagine I had full knowledge. The plane's going to crash today. And it's not, like something I've done wrong or something I should have done. It's just something that's going to happen. I said, to me, the bigger question is, would I have had the guts to get into the cockpit anyway? I mean, if the great mystery wants to bring you over to the other side and basically give you a week of its time, as time is measured here on Earth, to help you, to give you the opportunity to help you, to give you an opportunity to participate in your salvation or your spiritual evolution or whatever, what price is too great to pay? And if it's the great mystery asking, do you think you really have a choice? So and that's when I started to realize that I had a new influence in the way I was answering questions or responding to life or, my values, just myself. I mean, it's so fundamental a change that this reboot to Jim 2.0 was an incredible upgrade. That's about the only way I can say it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you did have choice there. I mean, you could have lived with the pain, not changed any of the gears, left it as is, and maybe either stayed in that place or transition back and continue on. So I feel like you probably did have a choice there, but you made you really made some really hard decisions to like, okay, let's look at this and really look at what this is all about.
True. And I think that's why it had to be built the way it was for me to really help guide my decisions in the direction that not only does the entire universe probably want us to go, I'm sure the entire universe wants us to do better, to make better choices, and to live in harmony and, be happy. And I think for me, knowing that would have certainly been agreeable in my heart of hearts, like, let's just design it to make it easy for the guy to make the right decisions here, because it's what he wants. It's what we want. Let's just do this. So if it, by using pain, like they say, a word to the wise and a 2x4 for the wicked. But I figure, if it's a divinely swung 2x4, it's a relationship, and I'll take it. Believe me, I am not too proud. I'm very, very grateful. And also, another funny thing is that, when you talk to a lot of people who have near-death experiences because of some horrific accident or like they drowned or something like that, or maybe it was a disease, like they went in with stage 4 cancer and somehow, even though they were lost for a moment, they came back. It's amazing how these experiences that deliver us to the near-death experience, while in most stories would be the climax of the story itself. Like, oh gosh, you were in this plane crash and you want to, if you could, you describe every moment you went toward Earth. Everybody's hanging on to the edge of their seat. With a near-death experience, those experiences that delivered you to it become a footnote. You almost forget that it happened. Like, I have no PTSD about flying. I could go get in another airplane right now. In fact, I have people offering me similar airplane projects to finish and go fly. And I'm tempted. The only hesitation now is just I'm busy with other things and kind of cross this off my list. But it's really amazing how so many of the people who have these experiences don't have like I said, sort of a PTSD trigger about the situation that got them into it in the first place. And I find that very interesting as well.
I'm sure your wife would have something to say about that, though.
Well, I've joked and said if I were to go out and build and fly another airplane, she'd probably finish the job the airplane crash started. We wouldn't be talking about a near-death experience.
Oh yeah, you'd be in all sorts of trouble.
Probably so.
Well, do you know, and I have to ask, because I know you have a major in physics. And so do you think that with the egg and the gears, it showed up this way because it's something that would be of very interest to you?
In more ways than I think we can almost imagine, because I mean, while you could say it had a very mechanical look to it, right, with the gears and all that. I would even say, it could have been almost like a steampunk look, like Jules Verne or something would have come up with. But to be honest, for me, and it's perfect that you're asking this, Marianne, because obviously when I came out of the hospital and I came home, and this memory is just cycling over and over in my head, and every time it sort of passes through, there's more detail and more of a huge overwhelmingly emotional connection to it. And I'm like, what is this? And, in doing research, I finally figured out, okay, I guess this might be a near-death experience. And as I dug into it, that really helped a lot. Well, in the current literature or books on demand, like, Audible and podcasts, it's very easy in people recounting their near-death experiences to many times touch on concepts that are within quantum physics. So, like you say, having had one of my majors in physics, I started reading sort of, let's say, the consumer grade level of quantum physics. And if you think about these different gears and they're passing through each other, to me, from a quantum physics point of view, I came to understand that these were multiple probabilities that were superpositioned one on top of the other, essentially. And if you think about it, every moment of decision has multiple choices we can make. Do you want to go left or right? Do you want to stop by the store or go straight to work and come by the store on the way home? Or do I want to say hi to Fred or go by this way and say hi to Joe? It's every moment has multiple probabilities within it. And it's the conscious act of choice that then collapses these probability waves, the one we choose, down into a single particle and moment, or what we call reality. So I understood I was seeing a representation of that quantum dynamic. And even time, it's amazing. When I was told I was standing inside the eternity of a single moment, that in Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll wrote back, I guess in the 1800s, Alice, asks, how long is forever? And the White Rabbit answers, sometimes it's just 1 second. I mean, it's like, okay, people have been dialed into this for a while. And around that same time, Max Planck, who's considered the father of quantum physics, who was actually born before the Civil War, they have a unit of time measurement named after him called Planck time. And it's 10 to the minus 44 seconds. And it's a very short period of time. It's 100 millionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of 1 second. And it's time so short that it's in that time that quantum effects manifest. So I can just sheer conjecture, it's as if I were in the in-between only for that amount of time. But for here, on Earth, it was a week. And you will hear how people, when they go to these different planes, time does flow differently. Another physics aspect is, everybody's heard Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. And what does that mean? What it means is as mass is matter, if we were to travel toward the speed of light, increasing our velocity all the time, the closer we get to the speed of light, our mass actually increases. It approaches infinity. And the distance between us and our target approaches zero. And so does the time required to go that distance. It also approaches zero. So the summary is this. If you or I could go the speed of light, we would instantly weigh the entire weight of the universe. And we would instantly be everywhere there is to go. And we would be doing it instantly. So the corollary there is that for light, time does not exist. So once we dump these bodies, we go back to becoming more of the light beings we are. And so if for light, time doesn't exist, then as we become less material and more light according to the plane we're on and its frequency and vibration, it makes sense that time and the sense of time or the passage of time would also be affected based upon how much light we are. And so, I don't know, it was just like there was just seemed to be so much internal consistency with each each layer of analysis that I could apply to my experience. And then, of course, you're sitting there and you can imagine everybody has some close friend who says, was this a hallucination? And you're thinking, yeah, except for the fact that light bulbs blow up more and computers act strange. And I even get weird experiences with electronic communications and things like that, things that just did not happen at this level of frequency before. And then you'll have other really strange things like many, many, many more synchronicities, things that just seem like there's just no way there could be this much amazing timing of people and events, exactly what someone needed at exactly the right time. It's as if you've been reharmonized in some way to the natural way of living and therefore the natural order of the universe, one in which synchronicity simply appear to manifest more. So you're just in this constant state of wondering, gosh, what's going to happen today? And is everything I thought was true yesterday going to still be true today? And it's like, it really is a new birth. It really, truly is.
Well, from my understanding, people who have near-death experiences, the information that they get is so real and so, burnt into their memory that they know without a doubt that has happened and that has taken place. And it doesn't really matter what anyone has to say. Someone's cousin's uncle, friend thinking it was a hallucination. I mean, who cares? So.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And let's face it, to me, a hallucination, unless somebody can say you can induce a hallucination and 9 times out of 10 if 5% of the world, which they estimate, could have had a near-death experience, that comes out to about 375 million people. That's maybe 55 more million people than live in the United States. And for the great majority of them to have had similar milestones within the near-death experience. While one may see Jesus and one may see Allah and one may see Buddha or Krishna or something like that, take all that away for a second and just look at the formulaic process of an NDE. You go through the tunnel. You see the dead loved ones. You will see angelic or holy seeming beings. You will have this life review, which for me, my future decisions, my future possibilities were the fruit of my past choices. Therefore, to me, it was just another take on your life review, but one that was actionable, one that I could apply that understanding right then and there to, help my future. And then, there's sometimes a boundary of no return. And then a lot of times they get a big message that they bring back, whether it was deals with their mission or deals with understanding, but definitely it deepens their sense of self and sense of purpose and sense of meaning. So I don't know of anything that can cause a hallucination that you would see that level of commonality across the board. Like, if everybody took a magic mushroom and it was the same experience over and over and over, okay. But that isn't the case. And no one's ever come back from a near-death experience being told by God to be a serial killer or something like that. To me, that's random. Yeah. That's a hallucination. But generally, people come back and there's more love. There is more of a feeling of connectivity to everything and everybody, and almost a refreshing of their childhood naivete. It's really interesting to see.
Well, that's where all the magic happens. And from what I understand, people that have had near-death experiences have something that's very personal to them. That whatever experience, if they see Jesus or Buddha or Allah or whoever, it's because it relates directly to them. It's very meaningful to them.
Well, we see here in this world, we see life through the filters we want. Think about it. We look in the mirror every morning and there's the best looking person or the most competent person, the best mom, the best dad, excuse me, the best worker, whatever. I'm going to go out and conquer the world today and all that. Over there, instead of seeing life through the filters we want, we see life through the filters we need. And that's the entire difference. That's why everyone's experience is not just doesn't appear to be, but it actually is so tailor-made to them because it's what they need. And sometimes what we need is to be incredibly humbled. We need to really look in that mirror of truth, if you will, and see that reflection looking back at us, warts and all, and just accept it. And that can be so incredibly humbling that it could take you a lifetime to just kind of get over that. But it's okay. We all have warts. But when you see it this way and you have this type of experience, it becomes about as personal as you can imagine.
So in what ways has your life changed after the NDE?
In every way, to be honest. And some of the top few are, well, first of all, I would say that anything I do in life now is the number one filter I run through it is I want to be of help, like love all, serve all, something like that. I saw that on a hat at Hard Rock Cafe one time and I loved it. I think Sai Baba said that. But the thing is, it's living a life in service to others. I've done a lot in life. I've traveled all over the world, all 7 continents, the Titanic, Mount Everest, a lot of war zones. I was an NBC News war journalist. I have an Emmy for work with National Geographic. I mean, I've really checked off a lot of stuff on my list. So now I really got to just enjoy life and enjoy taking that wealth of experience and what knowledge I have, plus my experience of my near-death experience, and in terms of how that's allowed me to view the world in a new and fresh way, and say, how can I help? How can I help people? So that's my first measure. And it was late last year at an IANS conference, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, that a couple of people were really insistent that I write a book about my experience. So I came home, and between September 1st and December 1st, in 3 months, I wrote one. And that's where I met Lisa Hagen with Lisa Hagen Books, and she took a chance on me, and so she launched me on my book journey. But honestly, there are other ways that have been challenging. 78% of people, or up to 78% of people who have a near-death experience get divorced. And certainly my wife and I have had our challenges this way as well. And I would truly say in this, there are no bad people. They're just overwhelmed people. And having a near-death experience introduces an ambiguity into the relationship. And there aren't many relationships that welcome an ambiguity. It leaves us with questions of, what about me? What about us? What about all these plans we made? Because your values have changed, you've changed. Like, who are you? You look like my spouse, but you seem to be so different now. And then in a way, that's kind of not fair. But honestly, I guess to be truthful, our marriage vows say, till death do us part. What happens when one of us dies? No matter that we return. On that day, our covenant is broken. And now we choose to stay together just because we choose to, or not. But it really does. It's a game changer. I'll just say that. And I really feel like, this needs to be looked at a lot more, and, more coping mechanisms need to be put in place for it. But honestly, remember I was talking about synchronicities? I'd like to share a couple of quick stories with you about that are just magical. And they're very recent within the past few weeks. One day, I called a local window repair shop to come out to my house and look at a window to repair. And while they were here, they took a couple of window screens back with them to repair as well. They called me and said they're ready. So I went by there at around 4:30 on a Friday. And while I was waiting to get my invoice, we were talking and just shooting the breeze. And as happens a lot, I'll find a way to start talking about my near-death experience. I don't know how, don't know why. it's kind of a weird thing, and it's not like it's just a sudden left turn in the conversation. It seems like a natural, somehow to me anyway, it seems a natural thing to talk about. Well, the husband and wife were very interested. And then the wife asked me a great question. She said, after this experience, did you find you were more intuitive? Which is the same thing as saying, were you more psychic, or did you become psychic? And I said, that again is a great question, but honestly, it's different than that. It's more about the magic of relationships and the magic of really bizarre timing. And at that very moment, their daughter walked into the shop. It was 5:00. And she looked at me and she said, I remember you. And then we're all looking at each other, and she goes, I am an upper thoracic emergency room nurse, and I remember you coming in from a plane crash a little over 3 years ago. And I'm thinking, how differently did I look between now and then? And then I looked back at the mother and I said, that's the answer to your question. And that's how your question is being answered. And this is my answer I was giving you. That's about relationships, and it's about timing. I said, what were the chances this was going to happen right now? And and you could just see we're all standing there. And I said, the really cool thing is that if I had said, yeah, my intuition's really tuned up and made a prediction that like your daughter's going to walk in here in 5 minutes, that'd have been cool. It would have answered the question. But in a way, by showing off, I would have kind of owned the moment. But by it not being about that, the magic was something we could all own. And we all knew this was magic. It was just so cool. And then a little bit later after that, basically when I was getting ready to publish the book on May 1st, we were gathering together a few endorsing quotations from some of the movers and shakers in the NDE world, if you will. And one was Eben Alexander, the Harvard neurosurgeon. And he said, sure, he would be happy to. So I sent him the manuscript. And the next day, his assistant reached out to me to say, he's working it into his schedule, but in a quick glance, he noticed two things he wanted to share with you. One, he noticed that both of you have at times lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. He said the other thing he noticed was that you started a business when you were in your mid-20s, and you only hired unwed mothers from a particular home. And I said, that's right. She goes, his mother at one point was a mother in one of those homes, in that very home. Not at the same time, but there was a time that she was an unwed mother, and she gave him up for adoption. And then he goes on to Harvard. So talk about a story in itself. And he said he just wanted you to know that he thinks of you in that way now, as someone who created a business out of nothing to hire women like this to give them a chance in life. And I thought, well, that's a nice way to get connected. So think about that. It's been 40 years since I had that business, but the fruit of that labor has come to bear now, at least in this way. This happens so many times. And like I said, I think it's just an indication that I've been given an opportunity to live right. And so I'm really very thankful for everything I've gone through to get here. And all I can say is I just want to do right by the opportunity and by the trust given me.
I think that's such a good, not really lesson, but a message for listeners, because not everyone has, excuse me, I'm going to call your accident an opportunity to be able to make these drastic changes in their lives and then be able to move forward in a whole new way.
And, I think too, because I'm starting to work on my second book, and a lot of the responses to my book and to the podcast and to interviews like this have been, how do we put something like this into practice? So that's what the second book is going to focus on. Not everyone has to have a near-death experience, get really smacked upside the head to get their attention. It's simply about making choices and about how to recognize what's important to you and making those choices, so that we're not living other people's lives and according to their rules. Because one of the things the In-Between said to me was, all the force of will you will ever need is found in the art of letting go. For no one and no thing can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul. And so as we get emails, it says, take this course, sign up for this webinar, read this book, come to this meeting, whatever, to be better in life than you are right now. It's like, okay, the process there is I just need one more thing to be better than I am now. Well, every time you hold a baby, aren't you seeing someone who's pretty much perfect? I mean, they have everything they need in them to be a happy spiritual being. Where does it go off the rails? So maybe it's not about we need one more thing. Maybe it's we need to learn how to let go of all the crap that we have put on us by trying to fit in or try to get ahead or to try to follow this belief that there's not enough to go around. So you have to get while the getting's good. And that means making morally compromised decisions and choices, ones that we could, if we could remove from our path, might yield better results in life. And so that is going to be the focus of my second book, which I'm starting now.
Well, I know we can't wait to read your next book, Jim. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about the in-between?
Sure. First of all, I do have a web page that describes the experience in detail, as well as some of the things that followed. The after effects and the phases of integration. And it's inbetweenproductions.com. And that's productions with an S, inbetweenproductions.com. And you can also contact me through that page. You can also contact me just with my name, Jim at jimbruton.com, BRUTON, Jim at jimbruton.com. And my book is available on Amazon, and it's The In-Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. And if you do order the book, I'd be happy if you left a review, even if it, an honest review, whatever it is. And through reading about the experience, or if you want to email me and share your own experience, I'm open to that. I'm always happy to compare notes with fellow travelers along the way.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Marianne, thank you for the opportunity, and to your listeners, thank you for the gift of your time. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course, to talk about your new book, The In-Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. The In-Between's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and of course, you can get it on Kindle. Again, if you'd like to connect with Jim, you can at theinbetweenproductions.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.